a potential primary challenger to Todd Young, House Democrats' property tax proposal, plus banning student IDs at polling places, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending March 28th, 2025.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by the Indy Chamber, working to unite business and community to maintain a strong economy and quality of life.
This week, the Indiana Capital Chronicle reported former State Senator Carlin Yoder is considering a primary challenge to two-term U.S. Senator Todd Young in 2028. Yoder served 8 years in the Indiana Senate. More recently, he's worked as a lobbyist and served as the Indiana State Director for President Donald Trump's 2024 campaign. He's also a close ally of U.S. Senator Jim Banks and has been sharply critical of Todd Young, arguing he's not adequately conservative for Indiana. Young hasn't been shy in the past about criticizing President Trump, and in a statement to the Capital Chronicle, an advisor to Young called him one of the most effective conservative leaders in the country. Should Young be worried about a primary challenge? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Mike, should Todd Young be concerned? I'm
not sure worried or concerned is like the right way to characterize it. I think he'll take it seriously because I think he understands the environment that we're in. I've known Carl a long time. He's a good guy, but that's a big hill to climb. You know, Young's got $5 million in the bank.
Right now he's got $5 million in the bank. He's 4 years or 3 years out.
He's got a great network from his time as NRSC chair with other Republican U.S. senators, so he's got a big base of support to draw from there. And he's been critical of Trump, but he's also explained why. He's not just like doing drive-bys on him, on Fox News or MSNBC. You know, he's thoughtfully explained why he's opposed to, defunding this or not supporting that. It's particularly in foreign policy. And he's delivered for Indiana, right? He's the CHIPS Act that was profiled, in the lead-in, was a big deal, and he's focused on being effective, which also opens you up to being criticized for working with Democrats, which is something we can't do right now, not without taking heat for it. Right. But it's also led to tangible things that have happened in Indiana that are almost universally considered good.
Yeah,
so I think he's in a good position for re-election if he seeks it.
Mike thinks worried or concerned is not the right words. If you were Todd Young, would you be worried or concerned?
I don't think so. First of all, those that don't study history are doomed to repeat it. We could ask Murdoch how well it worked to take on an incumbent Republican senator, and now that's, of course, how we wound up with a Democratic senator.
He got there. He checked the first box off.
Yeah, but he wasn't able to do the second, which is the same thing that would happen in this situation. Would the unthinkable happen and Young lose in a primary? 4 years in advance of the election is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, or 3 years in advance of the election is kind of ridiculous. He may not even be the program. It may be Beckwith that runs for the Senate. I'm hearing rumors in that regard. So, they could have a nice divisive primary, but in a free fall like that, obviously Young has no problem.
2028 feels like it might be a good cycle for Todd Young to be up if he's worried about a challenge from his right. Would you say that?
True. I will say this. I don't think he'd be worried, but I also don't think it's a given that he would easily win. Obviously, if Carlin gets the support of the Trump apparatus, he could raise $5 million pretty quick. Obviously, he'll need to raise more. So the fact that he's even starting to talk about it is significant. It puts a little bit of added pressure on individual votes. And, and I asked Carlin, hey, he supported all of Trump's nominees right, and things like that. And he said he did, but in his mind, you have to drag him there. Like, he makes you wait until the last minute to know how he's going to vote. And he's not
the automatic.
Correct.
He's a thinking man, Senator.
Yeah.
There's really no room for it.
There's no room for that in the party, that's for sure.
To the point Ann just made about 3 years out, but if you're talking about taking on a two-term incumbent U.S. Senator, Republican in a Republican state, is 3 years out the right time to be at least starting to explore this?
Well, it seems anymore there is no right or wrong time. You just, as soon as there's, you're always running anymore. That seems to be the case, especially because these races are so incredibly expensive now.
Yeah.
I think that when we look at this, we're assuming or talking as if the Trump luster will be as pronounced and as shiny and glowing, and that his imprimatur on a candidate will be as meaningful or as powerful in X number of years as it is now. I think almost by definition, he's at a high water mark. You've looked at his polling. He still has a lot of Republican support, as you would imagine, but even that is starting to show some signs that most legitimate polls show that Donald Trump is now upside down in terms of approval, negative rating in this country. Maybe not in Indiana, certainly. But,
or a likely Republican primary.
That's a very distinct.
But if
he'll still be fine. But
if everything goes off the rails, and there is that potential, keep in mind.
For corruption, particularly.
Well, any number of reasons. If you have farmers get fed up, if you have small business people get fed up, if you have a faction of the party that thought they were getting one thing when they voted for him and they're not getting what they thought they voted for, I'm not sure that luster's there.
But also, he presumably, unless something changes in the Constitution, or we just decide to stop paying attention to the Constitution, which
we have.
Yeah, flip a coin. He won't be on the ballot in 2028 either. And
we don't know what we turn that page to either.
Exactly.
As a party.
So
No,
and I mean, presumably it'll be a Trump-endorsed or Trump-backed candidate, but will they have the same sort of power to sway voters that Donald Trump clearly has had for the last...
No one has yet.
Yeah,
right?
no one has yet.
Tried in the last decade, but no one has.
Who's that going to be, and do they have that power?
And how do Democrats react to it, too?
Maybe the biggest unknown of the next few elections. All right, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question, and this week's question is U.S. Senator Todd Young conservative enough for Indiana voters? A, yes, or B, no? Last week, we asked you whether labor union voters will shift back to the Democratic Party as new party chair Karen Tallian hopes. 75% of you say yes, 25% say no. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Well, Indiana House Democrats have a property tax reform proposal they say is a happy medium between relief for homeowners and support for local governments and schools. Representative Greg Porter plans to offer a package of amendments that includes provisions to cap at 1% the amount property tax bills can grow for people aged 65 and older, freeze property taxes for disabled veterans, create a homestead tax credit for all homeowners, increase the tax deduction for renters from $3,000 to $5,000, and create a first-time homebuyer down payment grant program with awards of up to $25,000.
I don't want to continue to disappoint homeowners, particularly our seniors and young people in the state of Indiana.
House Democratic leader Phil Giaquinta says the Democrats' proposal ensures property tax relief is centered on the right place.
Just basically focusing on homeowners versus corporations is the biggest takeaway.
Debate over property tax reform will continue the rest of session. Ann DeLaney, would this satisfy some of the people calling loudest for major property tax relief?
Probably not. I mean, when you have them calling for the abolition of property tax, for example, or the fiscally irresponsible program the governor proposed of rolling it back to 2021, no. I mean, that's what the demonstration was for. This, however, is a program that, as billed, is a happy medium. It emphasizes Hoosiers, both renters and homeowners, gives some access to first-time buyers, and it is a thoughtful proposal that's practical. I mean, you can't abolish property taxes when you have 2,300 units of government relying on them, okay? And you can't talk about the 2021 rollback without huge firings of police and fire and roads that are already decaying, going further under. It's just not realistic unless, unless...
You backfill.
you backfill with a huge increase in income tax, which I don't think anybody wants. They need to think through a proposal that helps homeowners, doesn't choose between manufacturing businesses and office buildings, just does provide some basic relief for the problem that the Republicans have helped create for the last 20 years.
A big way that the House Democrats' plan spreads relief to most, if not all, homeowners is through a homestead tax credit that's paid for from the state level instead of the local, because there is an existing homestead credit at the local level. That would require, I think, it cost $400 million out of the state general fund. Barring a miracle in the April revenue forecast, is the state capable of doing something like that?
If they stop cutting taxes, they're capable.
And we have a nonpartisan redistricting commission.
Yes.
I think we can get it done.
Well, just stop cutting the taxes.
So, yeah, that's an achievable number, yes, but it's certainly not like where Governor Braun's trying to go.
No.
And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility if you just look at the revenue reports from the actual revenue, not the forecast, what just happened in the last 6 months. I don't think it's inconceivable that you're going to have a pretty modest increase in revenue.
Certainly not the $0 new dollars in the second year kind of thing.
It's not going to be catastrophic, but there's a lot of open-ended questions, like there usually are not, about what's happening at the federal level and what kind of state support financially is coming from the feds now that maybe won't be coming in the future if the Trump administration decides to chart a new course. So that's what's on lawmakers' minds right now. It's like, okay, well, maybe we get a decent or even revenue forecast, maybe a little bit of extra money in the first year, maybe a little bit more in the second year. But I really don't know what's going to happen next. So it's really hard to forecast. It's hard to forecast revenue. It's hard to write a budget on it. They are far apart on this. The governor, the House and the Senate, and the Democrats, they are a world apart. Even to the point where we're in the building every day. It feels like I was talking to a colleague this morning on our team, and we were like, it feels like end of session. Like they're like, hey, get that done. Like it's like we have 2 weeks of committee left in the second half. They're like, no, it needs to be done by Monday. And so we're doing end of session things. I think they're worried about what this fight looks like towards the end, and they've got this special session.
In the actual 2 weeks left.
In the actual 2 weeks left, and they have this special session threat hanging out there from the governor. So. I don't know how they get close to where he wants to go right now.
Consistent with your point about the federal funds and what the cuts are, we got to remember we're the third most dependent state on federal revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
To that point, does that make whatever this property tax package looked like mean it's going to fall almost entirely on the local level without any real state support for whatever changes might come?
I think that has been pretty clear from the outset that no matter how this chess game unfolds, the locals are going to take a hit. There's just no other way. Even if if there's a mechanism by which they can raise taxes through which they already have the authority to do, or are given additional authority to raise certain taxes, guess what? Then the anger will still be there. It's just that the anger will be directed at them, perhaps, instead of the limestone at the State House. Yeah. So either in terms of public opinion, in terms of angry public, in terms of a lack of wherewithal and funding and flexibility to pay for the kinds of things that local government pays for, they're I think, all but certain to come out on the short end.
We have increasingly from the Republican leaders in the House and Senate unanimity of message anyway, which is there are 3 goals with the property tax relief, which is goal number 1, the 2026 bills now it's the majority of homeowners.
Not all,
The majority of homeowners will be lower than their 2025 bills. Number 2, long-term changes that make the property tax system to eliminate the spikes. And 3, giving local governments the resources they need, or at least the tools to have the resources they need. Doesn't that feel like we're close to a solution?
No, apparently not.
Because the governor's just had doubled down last week on either elimination or a sharp drawback of it going back to 21.
Has the governor now boxed himself into a corner?
Yes. I think he has a bit. I definitely think the House and Senate can come to something. They're probably not very far from that at all. And I don't see any. I remember when the state had a property tax replacement credit and was spending $1 billion on it a year. I don't think lawmakers want to go that route at all. So, I think we're probably close for the House and Senate. It's just whether whether the governor would take something of a win or if he wants to, all or nothing, whether he's going to.
That's what
And now
this demonstration and the reiteration of that pledge is so damaging to Governor Braun.
Two things came up this week. One was, this wasn't like in a hearing, but behind the scenes, there was a conversation with locals where they're like, we're going to stop zoning residential. Because if we're going to create this disparity between like what we can go collect on residential property taxes, we're going to zone commercial in areas where we can, where we might have otherwise been developing housing, which puts more pressure on the other issue.
Yeah, which is a real problem on housing prices.
Which is a House Republican priority, is to try to like address, permitting and inspections and all that stuff.
Cutting the corporate and the state. Well, I mean, that's what you do. You look at realistically what's available, what you want to do, what you need to accomplish, and you stop projecting out for 5 years.
That's a good message. How about the hog barn, the pig barn at the
It was
fairground?
pig barn,
Pig
yes.
barn.
The swine barn.
Swine barn. Now it's back to
beautiful.
I wanna hear the golden oldies.
It is a gorgeous
It happens
facility.
to be true.
I want to hear those golden oldies.
It is a gorgeous facility that we don't have any debt on. I don't know that.
Well, there you
All
go.
right, student identification could no longer be used to prove someone's identity at polling places under a bill approved along party lines by a House committee. Critics say the bill is a Republican attempt to suppress the youth vote. IDs from Indiana's public colleges and universities cannot be used to register to vote, but for decades they have been one of the few allowable forms of voter ID at polling places. A bill authored by Republican Senator Blake Dorio would end that policy, banning the use of student IDs to vote.
I don't believe we're disenfranchising them. We're requiring them to do the very same thing that other residents in the state of Indiana do.
But Indiana University student Anushka Pandey says there's no problem to be solved here, no evidence of voter fraud via student IDs.
This bill shuts us out of a political system that is not only guaranteed to us by the Constitution, but that we will inherit sooner rather than later. If you think that suppressing us will help you, you are wrong.
The bill heads to the House floor. Niki Kelly, I feel like this question could be asked on several election bills we've seen, but what problem are we trying to solve here?
I don't know. I mean, they haven't given any actual concrete examples. I think the refrain is just we're making it more secure, we're making it more secure. Yeah, I mean, these people who are voting, these students, are allowed to vote under Indiana law. They already have to meet various rules to register. This is literally just when you walk up to vote, they look at it and go, yep, that's you. That's all it is. And so, I guess they'll have to make another trip to the BMV because some of them have, from their home states and they don't get a new license here. And so it just seems to be another step. I don't exactly get where it's coming from. And obviously the youth vote isn't really impacting current races in Indiana. I mean, Republicans control pretty much everything. So
I mean, this is kind of my question, I suppose. Without being able to identify any I'll put it this way. Representative Kendall Culp, who's the House sponsor of this bill, said in committee, and this is the first time I'd heard this argument, it was, well, we don't know if the student is voting in this state and their home state, and that's what we're concerned about, that there's no way to know if that's happening. This bill, as far as I'm aware, would have no impact on your ability to know whether the student has voted here and there because the states don't talk to each other nearly enough, which is another actually part of this bill, is trying to get them to do that, which is a laudable goal. Again, what problem are we trying to solve?
Well, I'll detour slightly. There was a system, I can't remember the acronym now, that was set up within the past decade.
Yeah, Eric.
Yes, thank you. I knew it was a name, but I didn't want to go out on a limb and get the wrong name. That set up a mechanism by which states could very easily compare this data. It was done with bipartisan support. In fact, I think there were a lot of Republican secretaries of state and other election officials who promoted this, the creation of this. But then the boogeyman was assigned to it. It became,
well, there was a question about whether or not the organization could direct states to spend money in a certain way.
Well, I'll go with my explanation.
Some states understandably balked at that idea.
To me, it took the same path as Common Core, which was a Republican education accountability plan where states could compare notes and collaborate until it was seen as the worst thing ever, and this now took on the same baggage. That's my shorthand for it. So then you have states en masse pulling out of it, mostly where Republicans control the election apparatus. So that's a non-starter in my mind. You had a solution, you took it off the table. Maybe young people haven't voted. Well, let's say that's a shame they don't. But with what we're seeing now, there seems to be some frustration on the part of what we've seen on the East Coast and ICE, and I mean, now granted, it's harder to, and there might be more barriers to protest now. You end up in prison or out of the country if you don't have your papers in order.
It doesn't matter if you do have your papers in order.
Doesn't matter.
Well, but be that as it may, I think there is going to be a backlash against. I'm already seeing the backlash, and so maybe this is to hedge off any kind of. I don't think anybody thought that far, but I think it's continuing to clamp down. Yes, but it would have that benefit for people who say, let's. This is insurance policy if students do get upset.
Well, I want to ask this though, because the Chamber of Commerce talks about this problem all the time. You hear it at the State House too. We aren't keeping enough young people in the state of Indiana, whether it's people who were already born and raised here and leave after college, or people that we attract to these universities and then they go back out somewhere else after they've graduated. And the argument was made in the committee that, like, one of the ways you can keep kids here is you foster a sense of commitment to their community. Is this making that harder?
That's way too big of a goal to try to accomplish with this.
But isn't it like a piece of the puzzle?
The amount of time we have spent to make sure that someone doesn't have to carry their driver's license, so they got to show in a million other examples in life to get through the world, but we don't want to do it here. It's exhausting. It's like you needed your license to get the school ID. You needed to prove your identification to apply.
You didn't need an Indiana license.
You can do a license, or you can do a state ID. You can go get a state ID.
You can go get a state ID.
Yes, you can go get a state ID.
Well, you know, we're 49th in turnout, and the goal in this bill is to make us 50th because it's worked well for Republicans.
This isn't going to touch that.
Yeah,
it's just like, can you just bring your driver's license? And if you're going to register to vote,
can you just not find a solution when you don't have a problem? How about that?
You're assuming
just bring your driver's license.
You're
put it in your
assuming
pocket.
some factions in the state of Indiana want to keep all the students who come here for an education. Some probably would say, if you agree with us, you can stay. If you don't, hightail it back to your state of origin.
That perhaps leads us nicely into our next topic. A congressional committee on China issued a letter to Purdue University last week claiming a national security interest in Chinese students and staff. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Zach Castle reports this comes as the Trump administration slashed the workforce of the Civil Rights Division in the Education Department earlier this month.
Republican Representative John Molinar from Michigan is the chair of the U.S. Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. In his letter, one of 6 sent to universities around the country, Molinar says Purdue has become financially dependent on foreign students, including Chinese citizens, and accuses the school of giving them unrestricted access to sensitive research and technology. He then asks Purdue President Meng Chang for detailed information on students, faculty, research, and partnerships with Chinese universities. Purdue has not yet released a statement and wasn't immediately available for comment. A Chinese official on Thursday called the action discriminatory, the Associated Press reported. The official urged the U.S. to protect the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese students.
John, how concerning is this?
I kind of feel the way Mike did a minute ago. There's so many. This can unfold on so many levels. Do you talk about the whole notion of looking to being a player on the global stage, or do you just want to turn inward? And that's where the bigger question for the state of Indiana. This notion of,
isolationism.
It's isolationism. It is a way to. Xenophobia is another way to put it. Purdue has done quite well. It's built a tremendous reputation because of its STEM programs at being a destination for students from around the world. And it has benefited the bottom line of Purdue. Now, maybe, I don't know to what extent. There are additional fees, I think, assessed for certainly out-of-state students and international students, which has enabled.
You pay the most if you're a foreign student. You pay a little less than that if you're an out-of-state student. And you pay way less than that if you're an in-state student.
I thought it was the most if you were from Bloomington, but they double it then. But that has enabled, I think, to a certain extent, Purdue to keep in place, for 12 or 13 years, the tuition freeze on in-state students.
Yeah.
And that would probably be at risk. I don't know where, but we've seen this with so much legislation, about foreign investment into agricultural lands or even other types of lands that may initially be close to some sensitive areas or might just be
in general.
Anything.
Yeah.
So this is just an ongoing discussion I think we have to have as a state about whether we're looking inward or outward.
Does this make life leading Purdue harder?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things at play here. One, we've got this issue we're fighting at the State House about kind of homerism and NIMBYism, and they don't want the chip manufacturer in their backyard. They don't want the battery plant. They don't want the data center. Okay, well, you can either create the opportunities in your state for a well-educated research scientist, engineer, to then walk out the back door and go work in West Lafayette, or you can't. And so, that is what happens when we train them and send them home. Yeah. Right? That they take that expertise that we invested in as a public university and leave with it.
Yeah. All right. That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at WFYI.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by the Indy Chamber, working to unite business and community to maintain a strong economy and quality of life.